On the line with us is Rachel Sheffield. She is a policy analyst with the DeVos Center for Religion and Civil Society at the Heritage Foundation. Heritage.org is the website. Rachel, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. The DeVos Center. Wow, I grew up in Michigan. The DeVosses were very active, I think, billionaire family from around Grand Rapids. Is that who put that thing together?
Mm-hmm. Yep, that sounds right.
Fascinating. Okay, so in Wisconsin, they did a variation on what Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich did back in the mid-'90s, which was saying that welfare programs are time-limited if you don't find work, which sounds great when the unemployment rate is 3.5%, but becomes real problematic if you live in an area where there literally are no jobs, or at least no jobs that would provide any kind of a reasonable living for you. And as a consequence of this, several thousand people in Iowa have been thrown off food stamps. It's about a quarter of the 60,000. What would that be? Maybe you have the number right in front of you. 15, 20,000 people?
Yeah, that's what the reports are saying, 15,000 people.
Yeah. Okay. And so, I understand we want people to work. And I think FDR was absolutely right. The best welfare program is a job. And so what FDR said was, I'm not going to give you food stamps. I'm going to give you a job. He created the CCC, the WPA, he built the Hoover Dam, he built the Tennessee Valley Authority. Eisenhower continued the program by building this interstate highway program. Why is it that conservatives are so opposed to Eisenhower economics that suggested that a job is the best welfare program, and if capitalism isn't providing one, that it's the obligation of government to step in and be the employer of last resort?
Well, okay, so I guess just kind of going back to I guess first to kind of set the stage of what we're talking about here. So, I mean, basically what Wisconsin is doing is saying that if you are an able-bodied adult without children and you're receiving food stamp benefits, that your benefits will be limited to 3 months unless you are working at least part-time or participating in a state-provided job training program.
Correct.
Essentially.
Correct.
So,
doesn't that seem like huge, big government to you? I mean, do you really want the government in your life that much?
Well, okay, I mean, I guess first of all, the thing is we do have a large federal welfare system, and that's the reality of, the environment that we're working in here, right? So, if we are going to, the goal of welfare should be to promote self-sufficiency for able-bodied adults, and so we're saying...
Well, wait a minute, Rachel. Shouldn't the goal of government be to promote self-sufficiency for able-bodied citizens, and that's why we should have trade policies and tax policies that promote economic growth, and that the role of welfare should be to help people out during a rough time?
Well, I definitely agree that our policies should promote strong economic growth. When we're looking, however, this is, specifically looking at our welfare policies, they need to also promote self-sufficiency by saying, hey, look, if you're an able-bodied adult, if you do need assistance, it's available, but what we want you to do is either to be working or, preparing for work. And the vast majority of Americans agree with this policy. A Rasmussen report from a couple of years ago shows that 83% of Americans agree that welfare recipients should be doing some type of work if they're going to be receiving assistance.
Yeah, we've been shaming poor people and welfare recipients. This has been a conservative canard since the days of what's his name? The conservative commentator, British Lord what's his name? Back in the 1790s. But that doesn't make it right.
Well, I don't think this is. This is simply saying that work should be the standard, right? Americans are generous people, and they want to help their neighbor, but they expect their neighbor to do what they can to help them.
But Rachel, work is the standard. If you look at, for example, I grew up in Lansing, Michigan. I can tell you from personal experience about Michigan. I've heard about Baltimore down the road from where I live now here in Washington D.C. Same thing. That when I was growing up, there were good blue-collar, middle-class jobs available because we were an industrial nation. About a quarter of our economy was manufacturing. It's now around 11%. And those good manufacturing jobs put a lot of money in people's pockets, and they allowed middle class neighborhoods to bloom and exist and grow. And they are now collapsing. I mean, the neighborhood where my dad's, where I grew up in, my dad's house was. It's all over Lansing. Things are falling apart. What do you do? I mean, Baltimore used to be a major construction center. It used to, particularly textiles. It made a lot of clothing there. Lansing was a major. My dad worked in a tool and die shop. There were probably 30 of them in that town at the time. There are now 2. What do you do if the trade policies of the country, Reaganomics, believing you guys, the Heritage Foundation, Reagan said, okay, let's, and Bill Clinton too, with NAFTA, CAFTA, and all this stuff, said we're gonna change our trade policies, and we're gonna let American workers compete with people in China who make 13 cents an hour. And guess what? China's now insanely rich, and we're not. How can you say to somebody in downtown Baltimore, downtown Detroit, where there used to be lots and lots of good jobs, we screwed you. We took an economic experiment based on Milton Friedman's ideas that had never been proven. We blew it. We screwed up America, and now you, poor Mr. whoever you happen to be in Baltimore or Detroit or even rural Kansas, you're hungry. We'll feed you for a while, but you've got to get out there and get a job, even if it's a job flipping burgers at McDonald's, and you're 40 years old. You got to and you've got good work history.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm not an expert on trade policy. I agree that we need a stronger economy. I mean, what I will say though is when we look at our welfare policy should promote work. Let's look at Maine for example. Why should it promote work?
Yeah, shouldn't some other shouldn't our labor policies promote work? See, what you're talking about is force here. And I realize libertarians are opposed to force. But the reality is that if somebody is looking for a job because if they don't get that job, they will not get fed, then they're more likely to take a job that is a really crappy job, which is why the Chamber of Commerce in 96, when Clinton did this, said, quote, this will improve the quality and availability of people looking for work. It will lower the cost of hiring low-skill workers. It will cut wages. The Hudson Institute at the time said that reform would be, quote, a boon for business managers. In other words, this is going to help us terrify, potential employees. People, they're going to lose their food stamps if they don't take the job. So we can offer them $2 an hour less. How is that a good thing?
Well, okay. So if we go back to 1996, so from that reform, we saw a higher rates of employment among low-income individuals. I mean, I guess
that was all with that. That was before and after the reform, and I don't think that you can make a causal relationship there. That was the .com bubble.
Well, I think that, you can look at 13 years of, prior to that when you had, the average stay on welfare for a child was like 13 years. And then after that, you saw a huge decline. So I think that there certainly can be something said for.
Well, a lot of that depends on how you define welfare, though. I mean, a lot of those programs simply change names.
Well, today, we have 80 different means-tested welfare programs. We spend $1 trillion on assistance, and the vast majority of those programs don't have any type of a work requirement. What Wisconsin is doing is, and other states, for example, we saw in Maine, they did the same thing. They said, if you're an able-bodied adult between 18 and 49, and you'll be limited to 3 months of food stamp benefits if you're not preparing for work, or even doing something as simple as 6 hours of community service per week. They saw a 75% decline in their rolls within a few months. I mean, this was even
so this big government program that Maine did, where they're looking into the personal details of the individual lives of the people, works.
Well, the
Heritage Foundation is in with big government, highly intrusive programs like this.
Well, you could say that we could. I'm all for saying, look, states, why don't you take over welfare programs? But the reality is that we have a major federal welfare system, and that the federal policies need to be. You need to have the correct federal policy that promotes self-sufficiency.
We're going to get stepped on. I'm sorry. That guy always steps on people. Rachel Sheffield, heritage.org. Rachel, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Great talking. To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.